What's up, y'all? This is Chase, and before we hop into today's podcast, we want to share a message from today's sponsor, Seeds of Love. Seeds of Love bracelets are great. You've seen them on a couple of our podcasts for sure. They're beautiful, nice, while also being low-key. And the best thing about Seeds of Love, in addition to being a great piece of fashion, is their mission. Their mission is to empower village artisans in Guatemala. Every bracelet is handcrafted with love in Guatemala, and $1 from each bracelet goes to support local nonprofit organizations in Guatemala. They're available in over 10 colors, including rose gold, ocean teal, and royal blue. As well, they have stickers and other accessories that you could pair with your bracelets. If you have a loved one's birthday coming up, share some love and sow some love with high-quality bracelets with a purpose, where you can make a difference while also making a fashion statement. You know, what Josue tries to do every single podcast. Follow them on Instagram or Facebook at Seeds of Love Bracelets and go support them. And now for today's podcast.
Welcome to the Perspective Podcast. Josue here. As you guys probably already know, I'm from the Democratic Republic of Congo. I attended the Oral Roberts University. I preach at times. I actually preached on Sunday, but that's as much as we want to go into that thing there. I am a participant in the Student Loans Forgiveness Program. I don't know. Hopefully they pick me. We'll see. To my left, we have Mr. Chase Brown. He was born in North Texas. He attended the University of North Texas. He's an aspiring philanthropic creative. And it is, October 21st?
21st, yes, sir.
October 21st. And it's starting to get a little bit cool, but we know him. The beach for him is year-round, and he loves walking on the beach. So we're very excited to talk about that on this episode. So, Chase Brown, how you doing?
I'm doing really well, man.
Yeah.
You know, there was a long run of a beach to walk at in Abilene. That's a joke.
Yeah, I was like, I didn't know there was any of those.
There's a little bit of water out there. That's about it.
Little creeks and lakes.
But nah, just got back from Abilene a couple days ago from the retreat with some of the hungry artists.
Yes.
Men, boys, young men, whatever we want to call it, that you should have been on.
I was there in spirit. That's what they say, right?
Yes, you were.
I think
yes,
Paul
you were.
said that somewhere. Yeah.
But nah, you just had stuff come up, but it's fine. Next one.
Yeah.
You promised me next one?
I can't promise. The Bible says not to swear by heaven because that's God's throne, not to swear by earth as God's footstool.
Promise isn't a swear. Promise is a promise. Promise is a covenant.
The only thing I can promise is God is good all the time. That's the only thing I can promise you, my boy.
Okay. I will take that.
Okay. That works.
But other than that, doing really well.
Yeah.
Got some exciting stuff coming up over the next couple weeks. Have Axel's music festival next weekend that I'm helping out with, that very excited about.
But that's the fun run, right? Fun run. Justice run?
Some people call it a fun run. I don't know how run is
fun. At my
fun.
school, we used to have the fun run.
For real?
And you did it to make up extra credits.
So is the Yellow Eagle fun run?
Dude, we're the Golden Eagles. Not you guys were the mean
I mean, just
Eagles.
just look at all this yellow you got on.
Now I was about to go into it. So for those of you guys that might not be able to see, this is podcast excellence right now. So my shoes are white, black, red, and it has yellow on the soles. Now I have on black pants. I have on a black shirt with white, red, yellow, and white. My hat just happens to be black, red, yellow.
Look at it.
This is crazy. This is like podcast 101. So for kids out there that are wanting to start off their own podcasts,
the fit's the most important part.
The fit is the most important part. It's not about the content. It's about the context.
The confit?
Confit.
I don't know.
We're working on it. Yeah.
Oh, man. So what are we doing today, bro?
Man, today's a special episode. It's going to be a great time. We'll try not to take too much time. We did this I think this is our third one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, our third one. So for those of you guys that have been rocking with us for some time now, as year number 3, I feel like we're raising a kid or something, co-parenting as they like to call it. But we are going to recap the year in our own lives as well as in the podcast and just talk about different things. We'll go over some of the podcasts that we did this year. Talk about some of the moments that stood out to us.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about perspectives worldwide. I think I read that in there. We'll also talk about the podcast and just break it down. Spend a little bit of time for those of you guys. There's other episodes we can plug in so you can learn more about why I just mentioned what I just mentioned. So some of that.
And equally as important as that, we're going to celebrate.
Oh, yeah, it's a celebration.
It's a celebration. Let's give ourselves
a
round of applause.
Yeah.
Good job, Josue. Good job, Butterman. Good job, Ronaldo. Good job, Ronaldo. Shout out to Thomas.
Shout out to our boy Thomas.
He a dad now, but
yeah, he's a dad now. We've been praying about him on the podcast.
He gonna make a comeback?
Yeah, he's a dad now. So he's on paternity leave.
Yeah,
he's on paternity
whatever
leave.
it's
so
called.
He'll be back. Huh? Yeah, we give those. We give paternity leave. Yeah. Huh? What do you mean by that?
You got some news to share with us, Ronaldo?
Oh, wow.
You busy? Okay.
Did you know if you adopt a child, you can also get paternity leave?
That's a way to skirt the system right there.
Yeah. I didn't know that. But yeah, adopting a child, you can get paternity leave.
I mean, it makes sense. You got a whole kid to raise at that point.
Oh, yeah, facts. I'm about to adopt 6.
Well, what if the kid's like 13? You still get it?
Yeah, you still get it because it's time to bond with the child.
Ooh,
I think that's what it's for.
Okay.
So.
Well, we as the whole house might need to think about that.
Yeah.
We might just need to adopt Austin.
Yeah.
Get that paternity leave.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what he says about that whenever he comes in. Hopefully, we'll bring him on the podcast.
Well, hopefully, he just stops getting nervous. So
he does get nervous, but it would be kind of weird if he's sitting down. He's like, the camera has to be. Yeah,
we got to figure out the angles for that. True.
Yeah.
True. But yeah, I think from the first thing that we're gonna do that we kind of put on our little agenda, that's not really the agenda that we're probably not going to follow at all. Recapping this year. Some things that I kind of put here that can be jumping off points for whatever you want to be able to recap, whatever jogs your memory. Some basic things is, I think for a recap this year from the podcast, it was a very good year for us from the perspectives of balance, consistency, rest, and stewardship, to where we had a good pace throughout the year, where I think the first year we did a really good job at setting a standard of consistency. Last year, we did a good job of figuring it out a little bit more of like, okay, we don't need to like nail ourselves into the ground of like, be consistent to where we get burnt out or to where we drag or to where it just becomes a burden. And then this year, we stepped into that even more this year with being able to be like, okay, it's been a couple weeks since we uploaded. So like, okay, let's make sure to get it out.
Yeah.
But not rubbing not what's the term? Grinding our bones dry or like what
something thin.
Yeah, rubbing our bones thin or whatever it is.
I don't think that's the expression at all.
No, it's not.
That was made up.
But yeah, whatever the expression is.
Yeah.
I think we've done a good job at finding some balance with that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree. I think the way you broke down like the different years, I felt like the second year, like we did a lot of videos, put out
and a lot of travel,
a lot of content. It was fun, it was definitely fun, but it definitely required like, doing that like every week, trying to make something happen. And this year there was definitely a shift, as you guys probably saw, not that like we gave up or anything. We're just, prioritize different things, and we'll get into that some more. But it was definitely as I'm thinking like just podcast wise, I think we definitely had a lot of like great people come on, as we do every year. I feel like, and I think the conversations were also different, this year compared to prior years. Because I think a part of that has to do with the year as a whole. Because a lot of our podcasts that we're doing it as the year is going on, as life is going on. In 2020, we talked about a lot of things going on in 2020.
Yep.
Same thing with 2021, same thing with 2022, And so I think because of that, it kind of helps with the conversations we're able to have, the different people we're able to bring on, and things of that nature. So hopefully those of you guys that have been with us since that first day in Chase's room, I think we were speaking into the computer, right?
Yes, we didn't even have mics.
That was terrible. I can't even listen to that. Like that's That'd be kind of scary.
I definitely have not listened to that
Yeah.
in at least a couple years.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Next thing from there is just to share the update with y'all, the listeners or the watchers, if y'all are on YouTube right now. Streams were up 25% on our regular podcast feed, while we had 15% less episodes. So let y'all do the math over like the real increase over kind of what that was. But obviously the reason for the less episodes was the rest that we had over the last couple months of 2021. Us feeling like the Lord was telling us to do that because of where we were at in that point, just as humans, and embracing that. And then from there, being able to start it up again at the start of 2022. And there was even a couple episodes, like I remember we released one in the end of November, letting people know just kind of like what had been going on in our lives. And then we released the one with Chris at the beginning of December. And then Elena and Josiah at the start of January, and then fully kicked it back into gear with Danny's episode at the end of January. But yeah, just to share that little bit of insight with y'all. That's good.
Yeah, our year doesn't start in January. It's in October. So
Yeah.
if you're a little bit confused why he said December or November, it's because we start in October, essentially the end of October
Yep.
to next October. So
Yep. Exactly right. Uploading clips to YouTube has been a really good thing. It's helped a lot of people be able to discover the podcast over YouTube. The views on YouTube have been pretty good. Subscribers is still growing, but we've had a couple clips that gone like over 10,000 views and whatnot.
we viral now.
Shout out to our boy Tadashi for that. But that's been fun being able to just carve those up, being able to have people be able to just find us through like short little segments, which is like a good strategy kind of thing to do.
Yeah, because I think that a part of what happens naturally with the conversations is the expressions in the room. You know, so hopefully the video kind of gives you guys a look into the expression of what's going on.
Especially this guy.
Yeah, I get caught just making faces. 'Cause sometimes someone will say something and I'm just, my face reveals what I'm thinking. So yeah, so that tends to happen a lot.
Yeah, man. And then I think the last thing from just a starting standpoint is introducing two new types of podcasts that we had, which is the topic segment type podcasts, where there's a question that the Lord has kind of been putting on our heart over the last few weeks, and we're like, oh, like let's record about this. And then as well, which you need to record another one soon, me sharing some of my writings through the podcast, but you also sharing some of your sermons through the podcast. And so that's been a fun way to be able to express ourselves through this avenue that we've created. Because at the end of the day, as we've expressed in the past, the purpose of this podcast is to be an avenue of exposure for Perspectives Worldwide, the nonprofit that the podcast sits under. The mission of Perspectives is to provide travel, culture, service, creative opportunities for people to grow their perspective, grow their relationship with the Father through those. As well, in the long term, wanting to bring unity to mission organizations and hopefully to the church. But in it, it would be disingenuous of us to not have our personalities and who we actually are also be displayed through this avenue. Then we would just be a sort of tool for the organization to use rather than people for the organization to steward and allow God to express who he's created us to be through this avenue. And so I think us doing those types of segment podcasts, me giving the writings, you giving the sermons, is a good way for us to express that rather than just internalize it, which is a big thing for me. But then also us being able to grow within those certain expressions and let that stuff out and discover more with the Lord. Because I know with me, I discover a lot with God through conversations. There's a lot of things that you talked about in those segment podcasts that I had different thoughts related to it before, and then you brought something up, and it was super helpful for me in the processing of that. So,
yeah, no, I think those. I mean, I've had a lot of feedback from the topical ones that we've done, where we're talking about different things, and we're talking about things that people can relate to. They're real life situations that we've discussed. Whether it's the music one, whether it is hearing from God, whether it is what are some of the different ones that we've done.
Boundaries.
Boundaries. People really, they love in Christendom. People really love boundaries. And off of the boundaries one, we also brought in Elisha, and we had that conversation. So that was really really cool. And his analogy that he gave about like the parking lot, and that really stood out to us. So that was really great. So just being able to like express in various ways, in different ways. Like you said, we are people. We're able to express ourselves in various ways, whether it be writing or preaching. The Bible says, I'm pretty sure it's in Romans. It says, whatever gifts God has given you, use that essentially for His glory. If it is to minister, then minister. If it's to prophesy, prophesy. If it's administration, then do all of that. If it's with wealth, I think he says diligently. So he gives different examples of various gifts that the Lord has given us, and he says use those gifts. You know what I'm saying? So this gives us an opportunity to use some of those gifts and talents that the Lord has given us, which is pretty exciting. So it's a great outlet.
Yeah, I agree. Some last podcasts, I cannot talk right now. Podcast specific lessons that I'll share that are maybe a little bit more technical than like those, but be able to share those before we get to kind of like some general lessons that both me and Josue learned just with life over the last year is I think we've done a good job and we've done well in keeping a line with our vision of perspectives and this podcast and discerning with opportunities that come up, whether we should do this or whether we should not. And I think we did a good job of that last year, but we grew in that this year where, for example, introducing this more creative element to this podcast was something that last year, like it happened with bringing on, I think the starting point was bringing on Street, being like, hey, let's talk about battle rap. It was something that we like never really talked about some creative things before that. And then it grew and grew and grew and then really stepped into play whenever we brought in Axel, which was a cool thing because we sort of married two visions of and elements of the podcast there where we want to do these nonprofit spotlights. We want to bring on nonprofits to highlight them in the name of unity. But then also that was sort of like an official way of us incorporating this creative element into it. And the reason why we were incorporating the creative element into it is because of this app that we've been working on. That is a very creative project in nature. And that app is going to sit underneath Perspectives. And so from there, it was a very natural part of the story of Perspectives and our stories related to this podcast to introduce this creative element to it. It was genuine for us to bring that into it because it's something that had become such a big part of our life and still is a big part of our life at this point with the writing that we're doing for it, with the developing, all of that. And being able to talk with people about that in a public way to where we can get their ideas related to these creative projects that we're doing while also honoring them and giving them a platform to share this. It was something that I know, at least for me, I was a little questioning and hesitant at first where like the first couple kind of like creative people that we brought on, like Montel and Tadashi. Like Montel, we started out talking about like travel stuff. Like we started out, hey, like this tour that you did in Australia and Brazil and all these things. Like, what did you learn from this? And then went into the music stuff. Because we also want to make sure that we're not just falling into the same sort of conversations that these creative people or even true for these missionaries or business people have all the time. We want to bring a different element to it. And so that's where the first conversation we had with Tadashi, we talked with him a little bit about missions, a little bit about cultural stuff, a little bit about his upbringing rather than music stuff. Montel, we talked a little bit about music, but still that was like the latter part of the conversation. Whereas now, I think whenever we have on people like Hovey or people like Wande, Tadashi, Axel, others, we're able to honor that creativity that the Lord put in them. Also honor the creativity that He put in us to have a really productive conversation that is also glorifying to the Lord while staying in our lane.
Yeah, and I think even like as you were talking, the word that kind of came to my mind was reach. not reach records, but maybe because you brought up TED, but in the sense of like reach from the standpoint of, we're not some, you know, people that have like this crazy reach or whatever. Like a lot of it has been, favor from the Lord. For some people we had relationships with, some people we didn't. So whether it be with various creatives or leaders or nonprofits or various things like that, the Lord gave us reach that was beyond ourselves.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so, and that has allowed for us to be able to reach in various places that at the beginning of the podcast there's no way we could have done.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so it's something that for those of you that may want to consider a podcast or something along the lines, that consistency is kind of what has allowed us to, and by no stretch of imagination do we just try to look for people that are famous so we can bring them on or something like that. That's not the game that we're doing here. We love everyday people. We love, because they're also everyday people. You know what I'm saying? And so not to treat them differently, right? And so we love bringing on everyday people, being able to have genuine conversations with them in various fields. And so anyway, so the Lord is giving us a lot of like favor and reach in various places, various industries, to be able to bring on various people and have conversations with them, which I think has been very beneficial.
Yeah. And I think that goes into the next lesson, and something that I think we've continued to be obedient with is the principle that the Lord gave us from the very start of balancing, bringing on these, for lack of a better term, creatives, these influencers, these artists, like these people who are stewarding bigger platforms, balancing bringing those people on with bringing on our friends, bringing on local people that are here, bringing on people that are mature with the Lord here that just don't have like that size of platform, because the Lord is giving them other things to steward. And in it, that makes sure that our hearts are remaining pure, that we're not here just to grow this platform however much possible, but to have valuable conversations that grow us, conversations that highlight people that are in our lives, but then also show this idea and give encouragement to others, which I hope this is encouraging to y'all, that influencers and leaders they don't own a monopoly on wisdom. They don't. The Lord gives everyone who is a believer wisdom. And it says in James 1, which I've been trying to pray this every single morning for the last 9 months at this point. But he says in James 1, he will give generously wisdom to those who ask. And so asking for that wisdom, and that is a promise, and he will give you that wisdom if you ask for it. And so therefore, I'm sure that the only people who ask for wisdom, I'm sure that influencers or leaders are not the only people that ask for wisdom. Everyday people need wisdom for parenthood, need wisdom for how to steward their kids, for how to steward their days, for how to organize everything, administration, like what you were talking about earlier. And so some of my most favorite conversations, especially even over this last year, were with people that we just do everyday life with. It wasn't with the people with the largest followings or anything like that. And those conversations were great, but it helps us keep in a really good place as well. And I'm glad that we've continued to be obedient to that, because it could be so easy just to kind of like fall off track with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then especially if we're talking about like godly wisdom, the Lord in James chapter 3, it says, "Who is wise among you? Let him demonstrate by his life that his works are done in the meekness of wisdom." He says, "For wherever there is envy and self-seeking, he says like that's worldly, because the wisdom of the world is earthly, sensual, and he says it's demonic. Wherever that kind of wisdom is, every confusion, every evil thing is present." But then he goes, the wisdom which is from above, the first thing that it is pure. He says the wisdom from above, the first thing is pure, The next thing that it is, which I think for all of us as believers, like we really got to listen to it, is gentle. It's like if you can express gentleness in your life, then because the Bible says that the wisdom from above is gentle, right? The first thing is pure, is gentle. It's willing to yield. Like, the yield sign where you got to slow down and let someone else go. Like, that's wisdom from above. It's willing to yield. It's willing to yield. He says it's without partiality. It's without hypocrisy. It's full of good fruits. And all of these things are wisdom from above. And like you said, that can come from anybody. You know what I'm saying? Because the Lord can deposit that kind of wisdom to anybody. And it doesn't have to be certain people that he favors in that kind of way to deposit wisdom from. So because of that, that means we're able to have conversations with a plethora of people and have them bring on the wisdom that the Lord has given them in various areas, specific areas, because like I said, we've talked to people about creative things. We've talked to people about business things. We've talked to people about social work things. We've talked to people about culture things. So there's wisdom to be found in a lot of different areas, and so which is good for us because it's like an unlimited amount of places we can reach from. To use that word again. So
man. Next thing, and we can see if we want to go through these a little quick. But I do think we've done a good job of getting down how we want the conversations to flow and communicating that with our guests. For example, like letting them know before the podcast, the expectations of like, hey, we want this to be a conversation rather than an interview. So if we say, like, if we ask you a question, you answer something back, we could very easily throw another idea out there. And if you want to throw another idea back, like do it. Like we want to just have conversation flow just like it normally would. Letting them know that, hey, you can interrupt us. Like you can interject. Like that's how conversations go. Good amount of the time. It's like people just kind of like weaving back and forth and then being able to circle back to something that they wanted to finish up and making sure that, like we just honor them and that they know like what the expectation is and setting them up in a good place for like what we want to do. From there, I think another thing that's been amazing is, which we say it a lot, is like just Thomas, simply put. Like he came along towards the second half of the previous year. I think it was the summer after the LA trip, something like that. It was like summer 2021 because Grayson did the LA videos. And then we were like, oh, well, we need someone who's here in Dallas rather than in Austin to help out with video. And then Thomas came along. He's been a really big answered prayer, but I think we've done a pretty good job at stewarding him as a friend, as a person, as someone who is willing to do this for us and come along like this journey. But now with him having like baby Isaiah, him and Angelica having their child, it's like, okay, this is another thing that we need to bring into our minds of, okay, how do we steward Thomas? How do we steward his willingness and his desire to be involved in all of that?
Yeah, Thomas, one of the hardest working men to DFW. He's at every wedding, so so for him to come and help us out, that's a lot.
Yeah, bro. And then last thing for this is I think for me at least, and just being vulnerable and putting this out there for everyone, I think I need to figure out a better job of how to efficiently do the audio section of things and making sure to get the actual audio files into Thomas's hands a little bit quicker. Because I know that there's going to be a lot of new parts of perspectives that are going to be coming out this year with the app probably being released, with a whole bunch of other life stuff that just happens to come up. Like it's going to happen whether I'm expecting it or not. But that is something that takes up a good amount of time for me. Obviously, like some of the episodes are easier just to edit and put out than others, but especially the ones with the guests, and like the more mics you add in, the more editing that needs to go in. And so figuring out a way for us to get the audio in the best shape possible to honor our guests and honor the listeners while also being like, okay, I know that this can't take up 8 hours of my week and whatnot. So that's something that I definitely want to figure out in that. So going from those podcast specific lessons, Josue, Butterman, Plantain King. Open up a little bit about just kind of like what lessons you've learned over the course of this last year. Just kind of some of those things with you as a person, like with your journey that the Lord's been walking you through over the last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I don't know if it's just because of the way I'm wired or just kind of the way that I am, but a lot of it has to do with like so relational. You know what I'm saying? A lot of my lessons are relational lessons because I deal with people. That's my thing. I'm always around people, and people are like, bro, how do you deal with always being around people like that? And so a lot of my lessons come from there, whether it be patience, whether it was dealing with people, having patience with people, walking through life with people, learning how to open up and share things with people. Let's see, things like I remember I listened to a sermon. I think it was Pastor T.D. Jakes. He was talking about like being really like vulnerable with the Lord in certain aspects. Because I think for me, like for the sake of reverence towards Him, you know, I'm not like, God, I'm so mad, I'm so upset. I can't believe this is happening. Like that's not usually what happens when I'm praying, for me personally. And so learning how to maybe not put it in those kinds of words, but kind of expressing more how I'm feeling to the Lord. I think that was also, for me, that was a big lesson that, that I learned this year, kind of being in a place to be able to express that. Because I think always being like a person of faith and all of that, which is great. And then when certain life things happen and it really challenges your faith and you're just like, man, like I don't know how to deal with this. And I don't think in those moments God just wants you to be strong. You know what I'm saying? Because how often do we have scripture that tells us that His grace is sufficient in our weaknesses? So learning to allow myself to also be human, to allow myself to be vulnerable before the Lord, because I'm on the inside, it's a faith thing. On the inside, I just become to be wired like that. So moments of quote unquote not having faith to me feel so strange, feel so foreign. But I've learned to be like, all right, Lord, I might not be able to have the faith for this.
Yeah.
Like I need your help with that. And that was multiple times throughout this year. If we're talking about it from October to October again, whether it be towards the end of 2021, towards the beginning, having faith for, like I'll share. So we did a retreat. We did a retreat in June of this year, and one thing about me, I'm not the planning thing is not in my forte. Like that's not for me, And so I grabbed a group of people, and I do this thing where I kind of like voluntold people to do things. Like I don't really ask. I just say I'll bring something up casually. I'll see how they respond. If I see a little bit of even a yellow light, I'm taking it. Like I'm inviting you into the process. So I did that. Grabbed a couple people. And we started planning for this retreat. And, I'm sure it was probably frustrating for them because they're like, hey, what's the vision for this? What's the verse for this? What is all these? I'm like, I don't know. We'll figure it out. And I'm sure, they were so gracious with me in the midst of that. And, we planned for this retreat. And one of the homies was supposed to come out and he wasn't able to. And so then I had to speak at the retreat. And I was just like, okay, this is going to be interesting. Because I was planning on just being in the background, making sure everything was running smoothly. But now there was more that was put on my plate. And, every time I've ever spoken or whatever, I always do it by faith where I'm like, Lord, I'm believing this is from you. I'm believing whatever it is going to be relatable. I'm believing that internally, kind of dealing with that process of believing, but externally, I'm like, it's about to be the best retreat you guys have ever been on. As the kids say, I'm putting out that energy there. I'm like letting them know this is about to be the best thing you've ever experienced.
Ronaldo's favorite verse: "Positive vibes only."
Yeah, positive vibes. Yeah. I'm putting out all the. So they came into the retreat like expecting for it to be something awesome. I went into the retreat like, Lord, I talked a lot. I build up something. It's like whenever you speak up something and then now it's like, okay, this is going to disappoint me or not. So that was my issue with In and Out. Pause. That was my issue with In and Out. People talked about it so much that whenever I finally had it, I was just like, and I didn't want people to have that. You know what I'm saying? On like a spiritual level. And so the retreat comes and I mean, I don't want to speak for anybody. Maybe we'll have, anyways. I don't want to speak for anybody, but it was such a thing where for me, I felt like the Lord exceeded my expectation. Because all I'm called to do a lot of times is just bring people together, and then we'll see how it goes. And needing to have faith that the Lord is actually going to speak to people. Not only that, but needing to have faith that the Lord is going to speak to people through you makes it even more. Like it's easier when someone else has to do it, but whenever the Lord has to speak through you and impact other people's lives, that's when I'm like, okay. And so, by God's grace, that was such like a pivotal, an exciting thing for me to be able to just see, like, man, we were really planned for this. Last minute, we had to change location. When I say last minute, I mean 10 days before we had to change location. And we did, and it was better, and we had more people show up than we were expecting, and lives were impacted, and all of these things happened, and just learning to walk with them. It's been a year of just continuing to learn to walk with them in different ways, different aspects. So now, whenever the Lord calls me to do something else that's crazy, I have that in my back pocket. Like, man, I know what you did through the retreat. I was listening to, I can't remember if it was Dr. Tony Evans or Pastor Miles Monroe, but he was talking about worship, and essentially, he was saying if you see throughout Scripture, especially in the Old Testament, whenever the children of Israel came out of Egypt, they started singing. Like they just started singing. Like the Lord gave them a song, and throughout Scriptures it says, "Sing to the Lord like a new song," right? And he was breaking that down to how the Lord gives us these moments of walking with them and experiencing Him, and that leads to like a new song that we sing towards Him. It's like a lot of people don't like to worship God because they don't have a song for themselves of what He did that could have produced or led to them singing the song. Like once you've walked through the valley of the shadow of death, that produces a song in you that you could sing to the Lord. And He doesn't have to, you don't have to go record it. I'm not talking about you going and recording a song or anything like that. I'm talking about in your heart, your response towards Him for what He has done, that experience that you experience with Him. And so for me, like it's been a lot of those moments where like even as I'm thinking about, I'm like, wow, that's what He did. Where in my heart I had to sing a new song because I'm like, I see a different side of you that I didn't know before. And so this year has been a lot of that in very different facets. Going through the ups and downs of like, really being time of worship and prayer to times where it's like, man, I feel like it's been a week and I haven't really gotten my word like I wanted to, and Joel comes on the podcast and he encourages you and you just keep going. So there was a lot of those kinds of moments throughout the years, like almost like the for me the up and down of like walking relationship with God. But He's been faithful, through it all, and I'm just I just been really grateful and thankful. So yeah,
Yeah. Love it, bro. Love it.
yeah. How about yourself?
Before we get to that,
Yeah.
I want to ask someone a question. Austin, when are you going to finally come on the podcast, bro? What, you want to hop
We were
over
just
here?
talking about you coming on the podcast.
Come on, give it a little bit.
I think soon. I didn't really feel like I was in a place to talk about anything or share anything really revolutionary. In regards to
Like
my
the
life.
American Revolution or what?
Oh, I mean, y'all, y'all have had some legends, and I'm not even trying to get into comparison, but if I come on here, I want to, have a positive thing, some wisdom to share, something that could help people, and so yeah, I think pretty soon we'll get that rolling. I've had a lot come up that's been helping me, and I think it's been confirmed many times in just conversations I've had with people that I haven't even started. Just people coming to me, and yeah, it's really beautiful. So soon is the answer.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it.
It'll be good. And yeah, just to encourage you, you got wisdom to share, bro. So whenever you're ready, Mr. Yeezy Slides or whatever the heck those things are. I don't even know.
Foam runners.
Austin just be dripping. I think actually Austin's drip what caused the flood upstairs. So
I would agree.
he was just washing his clothes in the wash machine and it just overflowed.
Crazy drip.
Goodness,
Drip
man.
Austin.
Goodness. That's a big gasp or whatever that is. Exhale. Yeah. So this year, it was definitely a year of growing in life. This was a very big year from literally like October last year, whenever we came back from the Big Bear retreat last year until like today. Has been a big year of just like pushing me to grow, of maturing me, of at times my pride getting checked, my ego getting checked and being like, Chase, you're not as good as you thought you were. You don't have this together as much as you think you have this together. And I'm glad to say that even in it being it was a very tough first half to the year. But even in that, this was the time where I don't want to give myself the credit in any sort of way. So I'll say it like this, where I feel like the Lord clung to me the most, where he grabbed my hand the tightest and was like, all right, stay close to me during this time. Because there were some things that happened where in the past I would revert back to old habits. I would fall into sadness. I would listen to certain kinds of music, just do different things that for a lot of other people, how can I say this? For me, it was backsliding. But for a lot of other people, they wouldn't see those sorts of habits as vices, which is weird and a dangerous position to be in. Because, for example, like for me in college, I think I've shared this a good amount on the podcast, but like I didn't drink till I was 21, wasn't sleeping around, wasn't doing nothing like that. But for me, there was a different standard there to where, say there was a friend who was doing really good, not sleeping around with anyone, not doing anything like that, and then something tough happened to them, then all of a sudden, like, they just take a step down and they start sleeping around again, they start drinking again, whatever. For me, within college, the thing was I would go, like, for example, I would go really well, be doing great, and then just something in life would happen, and I'd start looking at women wrongly. I'd start falling to lust again. Not sleeping around with people, but the thing is that fall and that step down is still equally as heartbreaking to the Lord as it was for like a friend who's taking a step down. And so it's weird because I want to just find a way to word it to say that it's not like my standard was higher, but it's just where I was walking at. Like even one step backward, people wouldn't know to hold me accountable in that because they think it's excusable in a way. Whereas for me, there is like an actual substantive difference in that.
I know what you mean.
And so in it, even though some things externally might not have grown as much as maybe we were expecting or we wanted it to, like for example, the podcast, it grew by 25%. And like, with real data, since we put out less episodes, it grew a good amount more than that. But that might have not have been, the level of growth that I was expecting, which is fine because this year I grew so much closer to the Lord, and that was the best thing that could have happened for me this year was that. And one of the examples of that was in an area that I think I grew was being willing to embrace rest. Whereas 2019, I still don't know this is the term, not working my fingers to the bones, whatever that might be. But I was just
stretching yourself thin.
That's another example. Stretching myself thin.
Which I think about it earlier. Couldn't think about it.
Yeah. Stretching myself thin. I was working a ridiculous amount to where even the buddy who I was living with in 2019 and 2020, Nick, he was like, man, like, he actually told me this after I moved out, but it was still crazy to like think about it. Like, he was like, man, like, yeah, for the last like year or so, I've been really concerned about like how much you've been working. And like the fact of like, dude, I think you're going to like work yourself into like sickness or just like some very, very bad like physical health kind of stuff. And this year, starting it out on a very good note of you and me feeling like the Lord told us to rest after the 2-year celebration last year, which is counterintuitive because every year for the celebration, all the guests, share the stories, share the posts, share all that, whatever, congratulating us, honoring us, celebrating us. The intuitive thing to do is like, okay, we just got this bump from all these people sharing this. Okay, let's go. Let's spit more stuff out. Let's go. To where the Lord, in a counterintuitive way, in a countercultural way, was like, no, I want you to rest now. Now that you just had all of this, organic promotion, like, nah, I want you to rest. And it's like, are you sure, Lord? Like, do you want us to take advantage of this momentum that you built or steward this momentum? We could have worded it in a Christian way. Like, oh, we're just going to steward this momentum that was built. And we're just like, nah, we're going to be obedient to what the Lord said. And this relates to like a lesson that I learned later in the year that I wrote down. But being obedient even when we don't understand the purpose of our obedience. And the fact that the significance of our obedience doesn't need to be present in order for the obedience to be worth it. Basically, there's times where the Lord will reveal to us the reason or the purpose behind why he wanted us to do something. But even in the times that he doesn't reveal that to us, that doesn't make our obedience any less significant to him or any less impactful to the world around us. And so in it, I think we understand to a degree why he wanted us to rest, because this year's been crazy for both of us. Thomas as well, Ronaldo as well, everyone who's a part of this. But in it, I think there's still a certain layer of it that I don't fully understand why he wanted us to rest, but it still doesn't make it any less significant in his eyes. But yeah, like last year we rested for 3 months. Like you were going through a lot of your licensing stuff. I was in a relationship at the time, and this set the pace for the year to come of being like, okay, we understand we have a platform to steward. We understand we have a project to steward that the Lord cares about. But stewarding doesn't always follow by the world's wisdom. It follows by the Lord's pace and the Lord's wisdom. And we know Matthew 11 of his yoke is easy, his burden is light. How the message says it is his unforced rhythms of grace. If we're walking out and being obedient to the calling that he has for us and these projects that he has for us, sure, there's certain things that we're going to have to work through and have to embrace hard work. Because First and Second Thessalonians talks about hard work a lot, but there won't be this like forcing that comes from it. And I don't really know the distinction between the two. Maybe that's what we could talk about next podcast. What's the difference between hard work with the Lord and not forcing things? But we can see. But in it, it was very, very good for us to do that. And another area of like in my life that demanded growth and maturing in me was stepping up in different leadership positions to where I was feeling from the Lord at the end of last year of like, hey, there's going to be certain leadership responsibilities you're going to let go of, and the Lord's going to prune away so that you can step into other leadership areas that are going to be more important. They're going to be more fruitful. And that was like, for example, the Tuesday morning group with a lot of our guys, being able to help PB out with that, with this retreat, with the April retreat. That wouldn't have happened if I didn't embrace the rest at the start of the year, at the end of 2021, but then also if I didn't let go of other leadership responsibilities in other areas of my life. Like trying to take leadership in the relationship that I was in at the time. Definitely failed at that in a number of areas. I'm going to say that. And there were other areas where I think I did well that other people didn't see that, but still was trying to be as intentional with that as I possibly could. Our perspectives team growing, adding Tiffany to the team.
Shout out to Tiffany.
Shout out to her.
Miss Jones.
We'll get her on at some point soon. But trying to steward everyone well who's a part of the team. Obviously with the app development, leading that is a big thing. And then serving with Axel as well. The Lord confirming that, trying to be intentional with that, going from there has been a big thing. And this, like all of it, all these things I've kind of said so far of this rest of these projects, of these leadership roles, of owning this house, of having all of y'all as roommates, trying to care for y'all, trying to prioritize my own health and closeness with the Lord. Like this is what good stewardship looks like, is taking all of those things into your hands, bringing them to the Lord and just asking what pleases him. What does it look like? Sometimes he'll speak directly into that. Sometimes he won't, and we'll have to operate just by wisdom. And sometimes he'll just say, hey, like go for it and reflect and see if you're bearing the fruit of the Spirit. And so it's been a big year of stewardship for me and learning how to handle things, especially as, you know, for us, probably over the next 1 to 5 years, like marriage coming down the line, kids coming up at some point. Like, yeah, I know.
Wow.
As difficult as it is for you to believe it. You're going to have little baby buttermans running around.
I need at least 20 of them.
Butter boy, butter girl.
I need at least 20 of them just
Yeah.
running around.
But I think the last thing that I'll kind of note for just some other things was, as I said, like the first half of the year was a very tough time for me. There's a lot of things I was going through, a lot of things that I was processing. And in it, I think that it was very unique because we were still doing the podcast. But in it, I could see myself not being Chase, not being my normal self. I was having a lot more long pauses. I was having a lot more times of just being unsure of exactly what to talk about, not talking with confidence or conviction like I have at times. And that was because there were other areas in life that I felt like I was penalized for any sort of mistakes that I made. And there wasn't a grace extended to me. And then I projected that onto other areas. And so then I started to submit to fear in those areas, or just became not confident and not, what's the thing that Stephen A. Skip always says? Having the courage of my convictions.
Yeah, courage of convictions. Yeah.
Or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so in it, that was something that was a real thing that I was going through at the time. And then I'm glad to say it was around, I was trying to think back of whose it was, but I think it was around like the conversation with Nick that I started to regain that confidence back and started to be like, okay, like we good. I'm going to put more trust in the Lord's grace to cover my mistakes than put trusting in my ability to not make mistakes. All of that. And I will say, like, it was an interesting time because I was growing with the Holy Spirit a lot at that time and trying to, like, around March through around May or June, I was trying to figure out, okay, what does it look like to hear his voice? What does it look like to give him the time? What does it look like to give him the room and the space to speak and be obedient to that? But it was definitely an interesting thing there of, okay, sometimes it was the Holy Spirit, sometimes it was me, just not wanting to make a mistake and having that. And then the biggest probably practical lesson that I've learned from this year is Sabbath, be obedient with your Sabbath. Like, give a day to the Lord. Rest. Stay off your phone for a day. Don't work for a day. All these things that can tend to be cliches, but that are real things that benefit us in the long term. And then also, as I've displayed through the podcast as well, but I've embraced writing a lot more. It was something where in the past I didn't think that I was creative. And I realized to a degree why. It's because I would internalize everything. I would not express it. And where if there was something that I was feeling, I would just like keep it bound up and just like try to think through it like it was a problem rather than just expressing it out. And then from there, just letting that art, letting that creativity just be there for people to take in, or for me to just sit with the Lord with. Like, there's been a ton of writing that I've not released publicly. Some I will, some I probably won't. That was just meant for me to be with the Lord. And it was a beautiful thing that in me embracing writing more, the Lord had me reading the Psalms, because that's what I was reading like January through probably around August, September. I was reading the Psalms like that whole time and seeing someone processing pain in the Lord's presence, to where it's unique that now we see these as public writings. But I'm sure for a time, a lot of these writings that David had were private and only made public after a certain time, after he wanted it to be. Sure, I'm sure some of those songs or psalms were like released to the public like right after he wrote it, but those were all in intimate times with the Lord. And that was all of, just like Joel told us in our episode with him, of an example of a man processing his pain, his experiences in the Lord's presence. And I was very grateful in hindsight to have that be what I was reading at the time while I was basically doing that in real life. So yeah, I know that was a lot, but if that spurred any thoughts for you, you can definitely share that.
No, that was good. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, it's I think even just like for those of us that are listening, you know, kind of look back from October 2021 to October 2022. I'm sure you must have also went through a lot of different things and walked through various things, and so we're just doing it on a more, I guess, public way than most people probably. You know, you internalize it, it's in your mind. Like, man, I went through this, and that. Sure, if you were to express it, you know, it'd probably be a lot as well. So yeah, it's kind of just what we wanted to do. Kind of just share a little bit of that.
So the last part of what we're gonna do is have a little bit of fun. Probably have some laughs along the way, but just reflect on each of the episodes that we had with guests and just kind of share our favorite, funniest, or best moments from those episodes.
Yeah.
So we'll first start with our boy Chris Hovey.
Brother Hovey. I think for me it was just being able to sit down with him, because you know I'd already talked to him prior to actually sitting down with him, but I really just enjoyed how much he talked about his wife. And how much he just talked about, for him, it just came down to being a son, you know, and it's easy to see someone from like far away and trying to figure out who they are. But when you actually get to know them and you hear, like, that was when did we record that? November?
End of October, maybe? November, something like that.
And I still remember that. Like, that didn't leave my mind. Just him talking about his wife and how much love he has for her, and then how much it meant for him to be a son. So
yeah, bro. Yeah. For me, it was him sharing like how, like with shows, how he tries to be intentional about being authentic rather than feeling like he needs to change himself to meet people's expectations. Because that's something you could very easily do whenever you go to a show, is like, oh crap, I need to cater to these people's expectations so they enjoy me, so they could either want me back or like promote my stuff or whatever, rather than just being authentic. Because the thing is, at the end of the day, the reason they brought you there is because they want to see the authentic version of you. So, Elena.
Yeah, I've went like back and forth with her, because she felt like there were certain things she would have liked to add, but I just love her perspective of like, because that's such industry that a lot of people are not too familiar with. And if I could even add, maybe just me projecting, but a lot of people probably don't care about. And we're talking about social work and adoption, foster care, and all these different things. And we talked more about fostering with her. For me, it's something that I want to do at a later point. So I thoroughly, really enjoyed being able to sit down and have those conversations, and her kind of breaking down the social work space that Texas is in currently. I'm like, wow, I didn't know that's how it was. So I don't know. I really, really just enjoyed being able to have that conversation with her.
Yeah, that's good. The mental health conversation was good for me about, okay, like making sure that we honor mental health, that being a real thing. And then a little bit of conversation of like, okay, when can we overemphasize mental health in a way when sometimes it's just like, no, like we don't, it's not like that serious. Like, and so learning like, what does that balance look like, and making sure that we take everything into consideration. Our boy Josiah, before he left for Orlando with all the
Josiah,
decorations in the background.
Yeah, there was something he said like 50 times during the episode. I can't remember what it was.
The one thing for me was risk it all.
I felt like he just kept saying one word. I don't think he was doing it intentionally. He just kept saying it. I was like, why does he keep repeating this word over and over again? But besides that, no, I love seeing his love for his church and his community. Hearing them talking so glowingly, because there's some people that go to the church, obviously, they're like, yeah, I go to this church, whatever. But for him, he was so plugged in, and we knew whenever he came back, 9 out of 10 times, 9 out of 10 times he was coming for his church. English isn't my first language. You guys already know this by now. 9 out of 10 times he was coming from church. And so, just being able to hear him talk about that, I thought that was really, really cool.
Yeah. For me, as I just said, the risk it all. Being able, where he exemplified that of risking it all, being obedient to the Lord, going out to Florida, and life with God is going to be a risk. I think there's going to be times where he wants us to risk. Just like he said with Abraham, like, hey, leave your fam, go to a different land. Like, that's a risk. It is. So, Danny, the Danny Bryan.
Mr. Bryan. Oh, man. Yeah, I think his life is so... whenever I think about like Christian people doing Christian things, I think about Danny. In light of I see his social, and I'm like, man, this dude, he's all over the place. And just seeing in his heart, and I felt there's such like a gentleness about him, like even the way that he communicates and just who he is as a person, and that conversation, that we were able to have with him. And like you were saying with Josiah, I think about him risking it and really being in a place and really being bold for the gospel, and like I remember asking him that question, like, you ever think about letting the circle rider stuff, putting those things to the side, maybe some of the Jesus stuff, putting it to the side and pursuing other passions? I remember really asking him that, and the answer that he gave towards that. So go listen to that episode. The answer that he gave towards it, I was like, okay, this is someone that's really sold out to this. So
yeah. For me, it was him answering the question of how he's stayed in love with Jesus while still doing ministry. Because I think it's something that, like for me, with perspectives, could you call what we're doing ministry? Yeah, sure. Like, I don't know if that's the term that I would use, but maybe that's just my own subconscious insecurities. Like, I don't know, with wanting to call it philanthropy rather than ministry, but it's still a thought that I've had of like, okay, like in leading in certain ways and doing these certain things, ministry wise, how do I make sure that I'm not doing those things just out of a selfish sense, or out of like a feeling that I needed to sense, rather than continuing to stay in love with Jesus during that time. Wanted to bring this one up just in case there was a fun thing that you had to share, because you were on it for longer than I was. The Instagram live that we had with Derek Reward and Chi-Chi about their album release.
Yeah, that was what's the word I would look for? It was interesting, it was interesting because in my mind, there wasn't like there wasn't like there wasn't like a structure to it, even though there was. Like it just all happened, and then Chi came on, Reward came on, and we started talking about this, started talking about that, and I'm just like, wow, So there was a lot of great conversations, and then Reward, only the way the Reward can do, takes over the dialogue, starts asking questions. We're all just like, whoa, where's this coming from? And being able to listen to Derek and Chi and it was just, I don't know, it was like, that was crazy. That was crazy.
I would agree with that. The biggest thing for me is continuing just to have such a respect and admiration for Reward, and how he curates conversation so naturally, and how he genuinely cares for people and asks questions, and even with all this bank of wisdom that he has, like he'll share some of it, but he has what you said earlier. He has the meekness of wisdom, and there's a yieldedness to his wisdom. That's beautiful to watch. Unessa.
Yeah, no, I love her passion for bear fruit. The Lord put that on her heart, and even now, that's something that she's been. I talk to her about that like frequently. She's kind of gives me updates on all those different things. So it's like it was awesome seeing that in such like an earlier stage to where it is now, to where they're testing different things, and just seeing different things that's coming from that, like from the company. So it's been like that was really cool. That was really cool to really hear someone that's like really driven. God gave her and her friend, gave a vision, gave an idea, and seeing them like really walk that out. Because man, there's a lot of people that have ideas. As we've shared so many times, the great Dr. Miles Monroe said, "The graveyard is the richest place on earth." There are a lot of dreams, books, things that never came to fruition that are there. So being able to see someone that was able to receive an idea and actually putting steps towards that is pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Us being able to give her like the opportunity to publicly like share the vision for Bear Fruit, and that was a really good opportunity. Be able to have that happen. Nicole. For me, that was, I think, one of our funniest episodes. You were being goofy on that the whole time, man. And then me trying to read off the weather like I was a news person, like just nah.
Yeah, surprisingly, the end of that conversation took a step we weren't even expecting. Because we started talking about.
So we talked about news stuff, and then her childhood, then her like moving from where she was living to Texas, and like the risk with all of that, and then can't remember where it went after that.
It went somewhere, and it got very intense. So go listen to it.
So now we talked about friendships too, like how to form friendships in a new place. Joel Willis.
Yeah, Mr. High Socks himself. Yeah, no, that was a great conversation. I think he's just he carries himself differently, especially figuring out how young he was, but I guess old in wisdom, if people can use that expression. It was like a very refreshing conversation, and just hearing them talk about like intimacy with the Lord and all these different things. I think was that was great conversation.
For me, this was around the time that I was like that I could start to articulate what the Holy Spirit was doing in my heart, and where I was starting to be obedient to it a lot more, to where like I was very grateful that I can't remember, I think I was sitting over there. I was grateful that I had my journal to my right rather than my phone like I normally do for notes, because there was like 5 things that he brought up in that conversation that I had like written about in my time with the Lord like a week before. And especially being able to talk about like, all right, what actually is like encountering the Lord? Like, what does that actually look like? How do we stay close with him? And that was, for me, I think like the deepest conversation that we've had. And not in like a self-aggrandizing kind of way of like, oh, look at me, we're so deep, we're so wise, but just like genuinely deep, calling out to deep, and the Lord moving in that. Yeah. Jair. I will say this. I was so I said it on the podcast. This boy is an enigma. I'm just like, we all close friends with him, but I don't know nothing about him.
Facts. That was gonna be my answer. I was like, we talked to him. He left, and I was like, what? Like I've known him for so long, and still, even after the podcast, after asking him questions, I'm like, he's still a mystery. And only him, right? He's the one and only. So yeah.
But being able to talk with him was good. Elijah McCall the third.
Mr. McCall. Man, that guy is what a guy. No, that was a great podcast. We talked about love, talked about boundaries, talked about what they're doing with Black Men Do Talk and just all the awesome things, he's a part of that he was able to really shed light on because he's a man of conviction. Being in Bible study with him, like if somebody says something he doesn't agree with, he's gonna bring it up. So he's so I love people like that that have conviction about things that do. He's the kind of guy we talk. Anyway, so yeah, great conversation.
Yeah,
great
bro.
Conversation,
yeah, for me, it was great to be able to talk with someone about another podcast, being able to hear their story, hear how the Lord brought it up to them. Because we talk about a good amount how the Lord brought this together. It's cool to be able to do that for another podcast. Morgan Bowen.
It's Bowen. It was such like a crazy like family thing. Her and her family were on sea for such a long period of time, and for me, I just remember like being able to have that bond, the bond that she has with her family, how much love they're having. That's such like a unique time in your life. I would imagine you can't forget that. So being able to hear her just really express that was amazing.
It's tough to say that the cookies were not my favorite part of that.
Oh yeah, bro. She made us cookies like before the podcast. Like
those are so good.
Even the basement don't get that kind of treatment. So yeah, shout out to Pastor Tim. And bring me on the basement, by the way. I'll come holler at you.
Hey. But I will say being able to talk about battling through numbness and being honest about that for one of the first times, like publicly, I was really grateful to be able to do that. Chaz and Mr. Lonnie Rose.
Yeah. I don't know what the theme of that podcast was, but I just know we had like a lot.
We just kind of like opened up.
Yeah, we opened up. We talked about a lot of different things. Okay, sorry, I got it confused with the Street and Chaz episode. Okay,
that we haven't released
that
yet.
one. Yeah. Okay. We talked about a lot of different things with that one, and just being able to just. I think we joked around a lot in that one. It was just like a very
Chaz and his Whataburger slander.
Yeah, that was a lot. He's been doing that for a while now. I don't know how much longer I can tolerate it, but that's a story for another day. No, Chaz he's probably been one of the most frequent people we've had on the podcast.
Him and Yvonne.
Yeah. And every time it's always something new because it feels like he's always growing, which is awesome to kind of just hear his journey and process. So
yeah.
Same with Lonnie as well.
Yeah, agreed. Being able to talk about the Axel intensive and being able to like process some of that even only a couple days after it like being done was a really, really beneficial thing to do, and still something that I like need to sit down and still process that intensive. Nick Brandt.
Mr. Nick, man, that was a short meeting, but that was like listening to him talk, I was like, oh, this guy's the truth. Not the truth like Jesus the truth, but like he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
I love when you really meet those kinds of people and you're like, he's the real deal. I should say the real deal. Not that the people before weren't the real deal. That's just the word that I wanted to use. It's because I had to leave like halfway through the podcast because I was during my lunch. But yeah, that was really, really refreshing. Funny thing, a lot of things we talked about on that podcast influenced what I preached on during the retreat. So yeah, that was great.
Man, grateful for that. I didn't know that. Being able to finally sit down and talk with him about the freedom that he lives with was a joy to be able to do. Because it's something that I've really admired in him a lot. That, as he said, like sometimes rubs people the wrong way. But it was good to be able to do that. And yeah, just finally sit down with him, because I've been wanting to record with him for like over a year at that point, and finally getting him to be able to, like, all right, yeah, having the right timing and all of that. It was great. Charles, our boy
Compton.
Chuck.
Yeah, that's the most I've ever heard him talk. You know, that was yeah, to this day. Yeah, no, that was cool. That was cool. I think because he said like about his past, like some of the things with his past, and just seeing where he's at now. Because as I mentioned, he was my 2x2 partner while we went through Initiative 72, and just seeing like, man, this dude is playing at a country concert, bar, whatever it was,
Christian screamo band.
Yeah, screamo bands, and I'm like, what? You know, so shout out to Charles. He played at the retreat. He played great. So not the retreat, sorry, at the worship night last Friday. So yeah.
Being able to talk about complacency versus contentment was a good thing, and him dropping the bar of basically like, if you're afraid of, I'm going to butcher it, but if you're afraid of actually things changing, that is a sign that it's complacency rather than contentment. It was really good. Like if you're afraid of losing the status quo, something like that was what he said. I think I could talk about this one. I don't know if I'm sure you listened to it, but if you have anything to share, you can. But the one that I recorded with Josiah in Orlando, being able to have the opportunity publicly to honor him and let him know that I see the growth that he's gone through, and that as a friend, as a brother, I'm proud of him for it, is amazing. Because like, just like I said on the podcast verbatim, is like, the growth that I saw in him is the growth that I wish I saw in other people. And he very easily could have shied away from that growth, but he's faced it with the Lord. He's opened himself up to that growth, and it's been amazing to be able to see and the fruit that's come from it. So last but not least, Mr. Jordan Moya. For me, it was one of the biggest things that we talked about, being able to talk about his TikTok experience, but him being vulnerable and being like, yo, I didn't handle this the best way that I could. There's a lot of people who would just kind of brush it off or double down and be like, nah, it was good. I did good. But him being like, nah, I wish I would have changed things, like looking back on it.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, I think it was definitely like his, I think he said maybe like 10 times, not that I was counting, but like his walk with the Holy Spirit and how like that impacted so much about his life and decisions and things of that nature. And also him just want to honor his marriage versus the fame or whatever it was that opportunity could have created. So
yeah, bro.
Yeah.
Agreed. All right. Well, that's all we had for the agenda.
Yeah.
Do you have anything?
Yeah, that was 3 years, been going at it for 3 years. We had a conversation at Torchy's. Shout out to Torchy's. Y'all need to sponsor us. We had a conversation at Torchy's, and then 3 years later, here we are. And so, shout out to everybody that's come on. Shout out to everybody that's listened. Shout out to everybody that's given feedback. Shout out to everybody. We've had audience, which has been pretty cool. Like people here sitting down and smiling and all that stuff as we've recorded. So shout out to the people that have come and really supported us throughout this time. Time doesn't permit for us to individually thank everybody, but we appreciate you guys for, as the kids say, rocking with us. And sharing the content and things of that nature. Really appreciate that.
Yeah. Second all of that, and thank you as a brother, Josue, for being a good friend, being a great co-host, being the funny part of this, because we certainly know I am not. So
you be trying.
Yeah,
you've made a couple jokes.
Couple. In like 130 episodes, a couple.
Yeah.
Just two, maybe 2.5. So.
Oh man,
but yeah, appreciate all y'all for being with us. I'll be with Jeez, you think I know how to say this after all this time? Both of us today. It is a Friday for sure. We need some rest. That'll be a wrap for us today. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. Please leave a review if you want. If you are listening on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, anything like that as well, feel free to give us a like, subscribe, comment, all that on YouTube. All of our information will be in the description below for that, as well for perspectives as well. If you just want to support anything that we're doing. I literally don't know what I'm doing right now.
I don't know either.
So until next time, much love. God bless. Here's to year 4.